Russian president, while being with visit in Kyrgyzstan, by the way, for past 3 days, and participating in CSTO summit, conducted a press conference for journalists. That happened till yesterday late evening, by the way, and he spoke about numerous topics, including on a topic of de-escalation in the zone of special military operation. And let me give you what Russian president said. So RT is reporting that Putin restates conditions for the ending of the hostility with Ukraine. Ceasefire could be declared only if Ukraine withdraws its troops from the parts of Russian territory it claims as its own. Russian President Vladimir Putin has stated, and this is important statement, obviously, because in Trump's 28-point plan, there was a mentioning of Donbass only. There was no mentioning of Zaporozhye and Kherson region. And I pointed out straight away, isn't it, that Moscow would never agree on that. Impossible that anybody here in Russia would agree even 1 square centimeter of Russian land to be given to somebody or anybody or whatever, right? We cannot do this. And even Russian constitution and law, by the way, legislation prohibits to advocate for secession of any territories whatsoever. So I said straight away, there's no way this point will be acceptable by Moscow, acceptable for Moscow. But I mean, Kyiv regime straight away rejected Trump's plan anyways, right? And now, yesterday, Russian president went in to clarify where Russian stand is. And as it was expected, and as I spoke about it numerous times, Russian president said that Kyiv regime's forces have to withdraw from all their territories that are Russian. And that means not just DPR. I remind you that LPR, by the way, Lugansk People's Republic, is already liberated, right? And there are some parts of DPR that needs to be liberated, some parts of Kherson region, and some parts of Zaporozhye region. And yes, that's where Moscow stands. And there are no changes in the Russian position. I remind you that it was 2024, isn't it, when Russian president visited foreign ministry and had a conversation with the leadership of a foreign ministry. And then he went in quite a detailed discussion in regards to roadmap towards the peace. And Putin already then, and even before that, stated that, Russian troops might stop conducting operations on the ground if Kyiv regime will withdraw its forces from Russian territory, from Kherson, Zaporozhye, DPR. And at that point, in 2024, some small parts of LPR were still controlled by Kyiv regime. And they should withdraw from there too, if they would agree, but they didn't, right? They even now rejecting this idea. But for whatever reason, when Trump's 28-point peace plan was published, Western propaganda, Western elites and Western media that controlled by them went to push this false narrative that this Trump's 28 peace plan is somehow Russia's wish list, which is nonsense, right? And I went to all 28 points and commented on them, and I make it clear from the beginning that this is nonsense, right? Moscow will never take this deal. Much work is needed to actually reach some acceptable conditions there. But nevertheless, these rumors and these false narratives were still pushed, by the way, that this is a Russia's plan. This is a Russia's plan. Well, you know what? Russian president himself said now that no, man, we are not interested in that. Right? We can use this 28-point plan to start talk about this issue, right? As a basis to start negotiations. But it does not mean that we are accepting this 28 point. No, man. And the Russian president very clearly said ceasefire could be declared only if Ukraine withdraws its troops from the parts of Russian territory it claims as its own. Period. There is nothing to discuss there. President touched upon the matter during the press conference in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. On Thursday, Putin visited the Kyrgyz capital for a summit of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, a regional alliance bringing together a handful of post-Soviet nations. I remind you, dear friends, that members of CSTO are Belarus, Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. Armenia used to be part of it, but nowadays formally probably still is, but no longer participates in any works of CSTO because Armenia is no longer independent state, by the way, not even pretending. Armenia is a colony of the West. At this point, the West successfully managed to implement their proxies into government there, led by Pashinyan, and that's that, right? Armenia is no longer operates based on Armenia's national interests. Armenia will do whatever they are told to do by Washington, Paris, and others. But anyways, let's continue with this reporter. Putin reiterated Moscow's long-standing position that an unconditional ceasefire with Ukraine is out of the question. We are still receiving calls for a cessation of hostilities there, and elsewhere. Ukrainian troops will withdraw from their territories they occupy. Ukrainian troops will withdraw from the territories they occupy, and then their hostilities will cease. If they don't withdraw, we'll achieve this through military means, the president stated without explicitly naming the territories in question. But by the way, Russian territories are Russian territories, right? There is nothing to discuss there. It's Kherson region, Zaporozhye region, of course, and DPR, period. Moscow has ruled out freezing the conflict and entering unconditional ceasefire, arguing that this would merely allow Ukraine and its Western backers to win time and replenish Kiev's battered military with both personnel and weaponry. At the same time, Russia has repeatedly stated its readiness to resolve their hostilities through diplomacy, which is factually accurate statement, of course. And Russian president went to comment on a number of other issues. Kommersant is giving us some key points from his statements, and let me share with you this report also. So Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke at the press conference in Bishkek, where he was on a 2-day visit, 3-day visit actually, but nevertheless. He answered the journalists' questions about the drafting of a peace plan for Ukraine, contact with Ukraine, the American delegation visit to Moscow, situation in a war zone, and the possibility of Russia's return to the G7. Kommersant summarized Putin's key statements. And so let's go through the statements. There were no draft peace treaty for Ukraine. There was a set of issues for a discussion, Russian president said, about this 28-point plan. And that's why Moscow said from the beginning that, well, we can use this for a basis to start conversation, right? And let's do it. Moscow is open for it. An American delegation is scheduled to arrive in Moscow next week. Trump will determine who will be in attendance. And of course, in this particular case, Russian president commented on reports that Witkoff and potentially even son-in-law of Trump, Kushner, will visit Moscow next week. But you know, by the way, what is happening in the West right now. Globalists, of course, as it was expected, targeted Trump's administration, targeted big time. They published through Bloomberg some details of the phone conversation between Witkoff and Ushakov, aides of the presidents, US and Russia, and they began pushing the narrative that Witkoff somehow committed treason or something while working with his Russian counterpart to organize a phone conversation between two presidents, and also to come up with some basis on which talks might begin on on a peace topic, right? He did not do nothing wrong, by the way, and I devoted separate live stream exactly to this topic. If you are interested, I mean, check out my channels on YouTube and Rumble. But nevertheless, you know what is going on in the West, isn't it? Western elites with their propaganda means brainwashed people, majority of societies in the Western world, so much so that no one is actually asking critical questions no more, right? Almost nobody. And therefore, obviously, this false narrative was not questioned in regards to this latest attack on Trump's administration and his aide, Witkoff. And in my previous updates, I said, by the way, that even though we would like, most likely, most of our audience would like to see America First forces being charged in America, unfortunately, this is not the case. Trump already demonstrated that he is not a person that would stand any principles that America First people sharing. Trump would not stand for anything really under the pressure, and therefore he might actually fire Witkoff, by the way, even today or maybe next week, I don't know. Therefore Russian president formulated his statement this way. It's up to Trump to determine who will be in attendance, although a few days ago it was clearly reported that Witkoff gonna visit Moscow, but now this is in question, I guess, right? Otherwise, Russian president would say Witkoff is coming. I mean, I know about it. Like my aides are working on the matter, right? Anyways, let's continue. Let's see what has happened, by the way. You know, I have a very critical attitude towards Trump, his administration, and so on. But I do have sympathies towards America First people, American patriots, by the way. We can call them America First or whatever, right? American patriots, people that want their government to be focused on interests of their people. That's what I want also for Russia. That's what French people should want for France. That's what everyone should want, right? Our government should be focused on our interests. Period, man. There is nothing controversial to say so in this stuff, isn't it? So therefore, obviously, I have sympathies towards ordinary Americans that are on the same page as I am, right? On this matter, that our governments should work for us and should base their policies on our best interests, right? And therefore, I would love to see America being run by America First people, because I see a greater deal of potential in a cooperation between Russia and US, because we are not natural enemies, man. We are not natural enemies. We should not be hostile towards each other. And if one day America will be led by truly American patriots, then I'm quite sure relationships between Russia and US will normalize, man. It will take time, but eventually we will get there. That's my take, right? But when it comes to Trump, even though he was pursued by many as to be representative of America First, he demonstrated that he is not already, and that's why I think he might back down under the pressure of globalists and globalist allies in the US, neocons, for example, and he might fire Witkoff. Might happen, by the way. You know. Anyways, let's go through some other. Russia generally agrees that the US list of points agreements. Okay, understandable statements. Following negotiations in Geneva, it was decided to divide the 28 points of their peace plan into 4 parts. Russian president said recognition of the Russian sovereignty over the Crimea and Donbass is one of their key points in the negotiations with the United States, Russian president said. And even though we need some more details, I think Russian side will obviously demand that Russian regions should be recognized as a Russian, not just de facto, but de jure also, because it's a Russia, man. It's a Russia. If if any peace agreement are gonna be reached, then obviously whole world have to recognize new Russian regions as Russian regions, period. That de facto recognition is not good enough, I think. Although it's all about negotiations. Let's see if we will get there to start these negotiations even, right? Russia needs a recognition of its territories by the international community, not by Kiev, said the Russian president. I agree with it, absolutely. The draft plan for Ukraine needs to be translated into diplomatic language. Some points currently sound ridiculous, which is true, by the way. And I pointed this out while I was talking about this 28th plan. Every word of the peace plan for Ukraine needs to be set down and seriously discussed. True, by the way, absolutely. Now we are facing issues, and Russian president was forced to basically went into these details because now not just Russian president, but all the other Russian officials and officials all over the world outside of the collective West are facing their situation when Western countries are led by so intellectually low-level people that they are not even capable of preparing documents on a decent level, right? They are preparing documents like if they are talking about some stuff on the street, man, or in a pub, right? Some in general terms and this and that. This is not the way business is done in this regard, man. Every word, every sentence have to be seriously discussed and seriously taken. And unfortunately, I mean, when you take a look at the people that are in charge of the Western world, well, you can realize that those people are unable, by the way. They could not. They literally cannot draft serious document because they are just too freaking stupid, man, and uneducated. That's what it is, man. And the Russian president was forced basically to address this issue. If you're gonna come up with some plans, man, please do it seriously on a serious level, right? And whole world is facing this, man. Not just Russia, but whole world have to deal with this situation, man. After all, the level of degeneration of the Western political class has reached such a level that nowadays U.S. policy is being declared on freaking social media platforms through Trump's posts. Is this not ridiculous? It's a freaking circus, man. What is happening in the West? Anyways, let's continue. United States generally takes Russia's position into account. Well, good if so. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Medinsky and Ushakov are among the Russian negotiators on Ukraine. Ushakov is in contact with the American counterparts, Russian president said. So quite understandable statements there, isn't it? On dialogue with the United States, Russian president went to say, Russia did not expect the new US sanctions against the oil companies as there were no conflict between Moscow and Washington after Alaska. And this is also important statement, by the way. Russian president is pointing out that, you know what, we've been very diplomatic towards the Washington. And unfortunately, Washington choose to escalate further with us, right? And this is bad. There will be some consequences. Russian president did not went into details, but while pointing out that we did not expect that US will go against us this way also, that means that Moscow is disappointed. And maybe step by step, once everyone in Moscow will realize that any hopes that with this administration of US some agreements can be reached are useless. Once this absolute understanding of this, by the way, that US is run by globalists and Zionists will settle in, at that point probably rhetoric of the Russian officials towards Washington will will become a little more tense. It's still diplomatic, by the way, and very polite to nowadays, right? But we are about to see changes in this regard. I think so. Let's see. Dialogue with the United States is not easy, but it proceeds without swearing or spitting. All through each side defends its position and interests. And while saying so, Russian president, of course, mocking European so-called elites that are basically acting as if they are being like infected with rabbi or something. They no longer can talk adequately about it in Europe. I would not say situation is much better in US, but at least seems like at least during the conversation with the Russian counterparts, American leadership representatives are acting more or less adequately, I assume. Lavrov is preparing for a meeting with his American partners. Rumors of his disgrace are nonsense. Rumors of his dispatcher, by the way. Disgrace, this is not the right translation of the Google. Rumors about any issues, some issues between Putin and Lavrov. Rumors about Lavrov's dispatcher is a nonsense, Putin said. And well, according to reports that I see in Russian media, in Russian segment of internet, Lavrov on several occasions asked Putin to resign. He is an old man. Many people don't understand that Lavrov is a quite old man. Being a foreign minister of Russia is extremely demanded work, right? Extremely demanded job. And well, do it through, it's a hard, man. It's a hard job, and Lavrov recently was experiencing, according to rumors yet again, some medical issues. He was absent for several days, absent from public appearance, and rumors started. And rumors started that there is some issues between him and Putin. For God's sake, man is almost like 80-year-old, and he is constantly somewhere, man, in some parts of the world, extremely active. Don't you think this job takes toll on elderly men? Come on now. They are not Terminators. They are not made from steel, man. They are just human beings, right? But Russian president was asked, and he addressed the issue that these old rumors about Lavrov is a freaking nonsense, and I believe in that, brother. Because due to age and due to some medical issues, I know that Lavrov in past years several times, according to rumors yet again, asked Putin to resign, but Putin said, no, man. No. Anyways, let's continue. Russia will raise the issue of preparations for a nuclear test during the negotiations with the United States. Obviously, a very serious topic. Russia cannot find itself in a situation where US conducts nuclear tests and we spend another 6 months preparing. So if US conducts nuclear test, Russia probably will follow shortly after with its nuclear test. But well, let's hope Trump will be informed well enough. I think Trump made emotional statement that he didn't think much about when he said that US will start nuclear weapons tests again. There was reports earlier that Energy Secretary of US was planning to have a meeting with the plant to explain the right, and to de-escalate the stand, to downgrade this topic of necessity of weapons testing, because there is no such necessity, right? Hopefully he succeeded. Hopefully, Energy Secretary of US succeeded, and US not going to go ahead with their nuclear weapons test because it's unnecessary, absolutely unnecessary. With the supercomputers, scientists can conduct these nuclear tests literally several times a day if they want to, right? There is no need to conduct an actual explosion of the nuclear weapon. But let's see. Moscow is clearly warning that if US goes ahead with nuclear weapons tests, we will do the nuclear test also. Russia is ready to discuss issues of strategic stability with the United States, Russian president also said. Okay, on a leak of Ushakov and Witkov conversation, Russian president stated maybe, like we joke, they were put there to spy and they uh, eavesdrop. What? I didn't understand this, sir. Maybe they are some kind of fakes, sir. Maybe they are real overhead conversations. Sir. Actually, eavesdropping is a criminal offense in our country. At least this is prohibited. I guess sharing of classified information, that's what Putin means. The problem is not us, but the struggle between the different opinions in the West and the United States about what to do and to end the conflict. Yes, I will say yes, this is the case. Globalists and their allies in the US have one opinion. And there are clearly some groups in the US that have other opinion, but globalists are much more powerful, seems like, because otherwise Trump would act very differently. But you see, Trump cannot stand for anything, really, right? He cannot withstand the pressure from neocons and globalists, man. Witkov is being attacked in the West by those who want to steal money together with Kiev, Russian president also said. On the contact with Ukraine in the UAE, the Abu Dhabi platform is actively used for contact between Russian and Ukrainian intelligence agencies. They mentioned the contacts even during the most difficult times, Putin said. The meeting between representatives of Russian and Ukrainian intelligence services in Abu Dhabi took place at the initiative of the Ukrainian side. Humanitarian issues were discussed and FSB representative participated, noting secret took place, noting that this was done in secrecy. Well, understandably so. When security services are meeting, it's they discuss some classified stuff mostly. I guess the appearance of the U.S. representative for Ukraine at the talks in Abu Dhabi was unexpected. Okay, reports are that Kirill Budanov, who is designated as a terrorist by Russia, by the way, asked a U.S. representative Driscoll to participate in these talks in the US, and the rumors are now circulating that maybe Budanov is playing some political games and want to gain some support from the US, certain forces in the US. Could be a case, man. Could be a case. Maybe that's why he asked Driscoll to participate in these talks. Anyways, let's continue. About the situation at the front line, Russian president said the fighting will cease when the Ukrainian armed forces leave their positions in Russian territories. The main problem for the Ukrainian armed forces is the growing gap between the number of recruits and the losses, minus 10,000-15,000 per month, Russian president said, which is a big deal, by the way, obviously. And we are seeing results of this gap on the battlefield. Key regime's defense lines are collapsing, right? Cracking. And in many cases, collapsing all along the front line from Zaporozhye. In Kherson, there are not major developments yet, but from Zaporozhye to Kharkov region, in many occasions, in many areas, Kiev regime's defense lines are cracking and they're quite often collapsing, exactly due to lack of manpower. Russian president also said that positive dynamics are maintained in all areas of the special military operation, and the pace of their offensive is increasing, which is also factual. Desertion in the Ukrainian army is very high, and it's unlikely anything can be done about it. Some Ukrainian armed forces soldiers look like homeless people, which is also true, by the way, when Russian troops take POWs, when Kiev regime's units are laying down arms and surrendering. Sometimes interviews with these people are published, and they truly look like they've been abandoned for many, many months. Like they look sad, man. Right? They don't look like fighters. This is true, factual, and probably you have seen those videos, isn't it? Fighting is already underway in Komsomolsk, Krasnoarmeysk, and Dmitrov. Of course, Krasnoarmeysk and Dmitrov is across Mirnograd. So Krasnoarmeysk and Dmitrov are completely surrounded, encircled by Russian forces, and Volchansk is almost entirely in Russian hands, Russian president said. And yes, this is true. I reported about situation not just in across Mirnograd or Konstantinovka, but also in Volchansk. And yet again, since late evening yesterday and to this morning, number of sources are already reporting that Russian troops established full control over the Volchansk. Yesterday, by yesterday's time, Russian troops were in control of 90% of the city, and clearing operation was underway in the rest of their territory. So it might be that Russian troops actually during the past 12 hours finalized their offensive in Volchansk and established full operational control over the city. Although there might be some points of resistance of encircled units of the Kiev regime here and there. The Vostok group is advancing rapidly through the north of Zaporozhye region and has already approached Gulyai-Polye, Russian president said, which is also factual. And I can tell you more, man. Russian troops are inside the Gulyai-Polye already. Russian troops are inside the Gulyai-Polye, and even Kiev regime, as a propaganda outlets, are confirming this and complaining that a number of units flee the positions without orders. And that's the way they are explaining this rapid advance of the Russian militaries there. Collapse of the front line is inevitable for Ukraine if the situation in Kupiansk is repeated in other areas, and it will be repeated, by the way. I expect maybe in next several days, maybe before end of this week, but I expect to see mass surrenders of the Kiev regime's forces in Mirnograd. I remind you that in Mirnograd, the France Kiev regime deployed some of the most battle-capable brigades, and I think Russian side will conduct negotiations with them. Russian side will explain the situation, will explain to them that they are fighting their own brothers, man, and sisters, and they are dying for geopolitical agenda of the Western elites and this terrorist regime of Zelensky, because Russia is not a threat for anybody on the Kiev-controlled territory, unless that anybody has committed a crime, right? And hopefully commanders of the encircled units will be persuaded, and they will lay down arms and surrender, and that's gonna have a shocking effect on many units of the Kiev regime. So I expect relatively shortly to see mass surrenders of hundreds, potentially thousands of troops of Kiev regime in Mirnograd. Let's see. About Ukraine's mistake, Russian president went to say that we ultimately want to reach an agreement with Ukraine, but this is currently practically legally impossible. Signing documents with the current Ukrainian leadership is pointless. They made a strategic mistake by fearing to hold the presidential election. Russia is also in a state of armed conflict, but we held elections, which is true about it. Just recently, there was local elections, isn't it? Including in regions that are bordering zone of special military operation and are shelled by Kiev regime's forces on a regular basis, but elections did take place there too, right? Only the Verkhovna Rada, that is parliament there in Ukraine, has the right to extend its powers during the wartime. The Ukrainian president does not, based on Ukraine's constitution. Russian president reiterated basically what he already have stated before. On relations with Europe, Russian president said that Russia is ready to confirm its lack of intention to attack Europe. Russia is ready to discuss European security issues with the West. The Russian government is developing a package of countermeasures in the event that Russian assets are confiscated in Europe. Confiscation would constitute theft of someone else's property. The possible confiscation of Russian assets will sharply reduce confidence in the Eurozone, Russian president said. And this is all factual, by the way. This is all true, of course. And it is funny that Russian president time and again has to reiterate that Russia has no plans to attack Europe. Well, why would we attack Europe if not provoked? I mean, can anybody explain? Just because it's not explanation. And that's what Western propaganda does, you know. They say, well, they will attack because, well, they will attack. And that's it, man. Why? Why have we have to attack Europe, man? Don't we have any other business to do? What the hell? But unfortunately, you know what is going on in the West, by the way. They are terrifying. They are terrorizing their own public with this non-existent threat of Russia attacking. And they are doing this because it's Europe, by the way. It's the European elites that are preparing for a war with Russia. They want to attack Russia. They plan to attack Russia because they cannot live with the idea that they failed to achieve strategical defeat of the Russian Federation. And they, European elites, globalists, and so on, they are afraid that they're going to lose relevance on the geopolitical scale if they lost this proxy war because they lack resources. They wanted to destroy Russia, dismantle Russia, colonize Russia for resources, right? That's what their plan was, to get their hands on the resources, and that will give them a chance to stay relevant, to be competitive on the world scale, on the world stage. And they are losing this war now, and they cannot face this reality. And that's why they are preparing European countries for a war. That's what they do, and I will get to this point in a minute, by the way. There is quite a stuff to discuss there, right? But it is at one hand funny and in other hand tragic that Russian president has to explain this simple stuff time and again to the European societies. I guess Russian president, while saying so, is addressing European societies that, guys, we don't see you as enemies. We don't want to see you as enemies. We don't want to attack you. We have no plans for that, right? It's your elites that are hostile towards us, and you know what? Take care of your elites. If you truly want peace, take care of your elites, right? To make sure that they're not going to provoke war, because that's what they do. On returning to the G7 or G8 that Trump recently stated again, Russia did not ask to join the G7, G8. It was invited there. At the time, Russia stopped attending G8 summit even before the Ukraine crisis of 2014. Russia has not yet been officially invited to return to G8. Russia does not understand how to interact with the G7 in the current circumstances. Well, we arrived. Hello. So what? Are we going to and look at each other? Basically, Russia said, what we're going to talk about, right? What is the point? Contacts between Russia and G7 in implementing the US plan for Ukraine are possible, he said. And excuse me, friends. And earlier, by the way, Russian president already said publicly that Russia is not interested in G7, G8. It's a useless organization because it does not represent neither leading economies in this world, right? With the exception of US, there are no leading economies in G7, by the way. It's a joke. All the rest is a freaking joke, man, right? G20 is a bit different, but G7, it's a freaking joke. And therefore, what is the point for Russia to be part of this bloc which represents economies that are in their decline. What is the point? And once Russian delegation, let's say, get there on some summit, what they're gonna talk about? Weather? No, man. Thanks, no. And by the way, I guess that's enough. There were some more statements. It was a big press conference of the Russian president, but I guess I did share quite enough key points of his statements. If you want to go into details, well, on Kommersant, by the way, you can find this particular article about it, and the browser will translate it for you, like I did right now. This is Google translation, by the way. Originally, this article is in Russian, of course.